Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio, welcoming you to another edition of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Connie R. Faltynek. We'll be discussing her fantastic book, Pain, Why Do We Continue to Suffer? The Culture and Science of Pain. Available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And while you guys are there at her Amazon page, make sure to check out the video trailer that she has there as well. Connie was brought to our network by some of the best movers in the business, author Reputation Press Publishing. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, move it through ARP. You can find them at authorreputationpress.com. Guys, listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Connie here on the line because her book that we're going to be discussing is such an informative approach to pain. This book really explores different options, okay? It's not a self-help narrative, and Connie really wants to make sure that we put that out there and we clarify that because pain is just as versatile as the individual in which it affects. So just because something works for one person doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. But there are options to explore with your primary healthcare physician. And she comprised this book specifically with that in mind. She knows that pain is complex and that the solutions vary with the individual, but the attempts should still be made. And exploring them is still very, very beneficial. And listen, she's the expert, okay? She's done the research. She put the book together. She's going to be able to articulate all the nuances in her book much better than I ever could. So without further ado, let's bring her here with us. Connie, first and foremost, thank you so much for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction. How are you?
I'm fine, and thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I know I'm not a spring chicken anymore, okay? As I'm starting to get older and get further up in age, a lot of things really inflict pain upon me that when I was younger and I was in my 20s and I was a teen, man, I would be able to be, and I was very athletic, so I'd be outside, I'd play basketball and other sports for hours on end. And then I'd come home, I'd be sore a little bit, but the very next day I'd be ready to go again. And now, as I'm in my 30s and getting above, the slightest things will start to cause my body pain. And this is going to be a book that is just as informative for me as it is for our listening audience. And I know we have so much to cover. So before we jump into your book itself, Connie, let's hold off slightly. Start by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself.
Okay. I have a PhD in biochemistry, and after some postdoc training, then I went to the National Institutes of Health, and then I moved into the pharmaceutical industry, where I was tasked with trying to identify new medications for different indications. The last indications I worked on was pain, and I worked on this for several years. And the idea was to discover new medications that are as effective as the opioids, because the other medications out there are not as effective. But obviously we want to get rid of the liabilities and the abuse potential found with opioids. So what I was supposed to be doing and attempted to do was to discover new drugs that act in different ways that would be just as effective as opioids, but without the abuse potential. And in my book, I go through some of the research that we did in a way so that I can inform a wider audience of how drug discovery works and the pitfalls and the dangers of not being able to succeed. It's a very complex medical condition. There are so many players in the pain field. By players, I mean various molecules, various proteins, small molecules, whatever, that contribute to the overall perspective that we have when we feel pain. And it's not just a local thing. It's also, you don't feel pain until you get a signal that moves from, say, your toe, if you hit your toe with a hammer, then the nerves in your toes send the signal all the way up into the spinal cord, and then from the spinal cord all the way up into the brain. So unless that signal reaches the brain, you don't feel pain. So it's a very, very complex process with so many different layers, which complicates the ability to find new medications to effectively relieve pain. So I worked in pharma for a long time, totally loved drug discovery in spite of all its ups and downs. But if anybody's interested in that as a field, I strongly recommend it if you have a lot of perseverance.
So we know a little bit more about the book based upon your description. And we know what inspired you to really start doing the research, of course, given your work history. Now, why didn't it end there with the research that you were able to comprise? Why did you then feel compelled to put this information into a book and put it out for the public to be able to partake in as well?
Well, some of the information in the book is available in other places. It's just that people don't always know where to find it. For example, if you wanted to look at a comparison of what are the issues, say, with aspirin versus Tylenol. Those things are out there, but people don't necessarily know where to find it. So the book talks about the medications that are out there. It talks about the research that my department did and I was directing, and the outcomes of that, the hurdles that we ran into as we were attempting to move medications into the clinic. So that part, the research that was done, it would be very hard for people to find it. It's all been published, but it's all in very specialized scientific journals, which are not really aimed at a non-specialist audience. So here I wrote about the research in a way that is accessible to people who are not scientists. So that part, yeah, it's there, but there's much more to it than that. I also wanted to talk about, my perspectives in terms of what needs to be done in pain research to enable people in the future to not suffer from so much pain. But besides the medicine and the science, there are other aspects that contribute to pain. And pain is, it's a physical process, as I mentioned, that nerve signals go through the body, and those are physical processes. Mm-hmm. But there also are emotional aspects that contribute significantly to pain. So I became interested in some of these emotional aspects. These were things that I wasn't working on, but I know that they greatly do contribute to the overall feeling of pain. And the emotional aspects come from a variety of different reasons. Some are people's just inherent state of anxiety, for example, can play a huge role in how severe the pain feels. But other things come from a background, a cultural background, that throughout history, especially in the Western world, that pain was often viewed as something that should not be controlled. It should not be eliminated. And this was true with the ancient Stoics in Greece, but it even became more dominant in the Middle Ages and in early modern times from the Christian church, in that the Christian church taught that pain can be a blessing. It can be a blessing or it could be a punishment. And in those cases, you weren't supposed to make it go away. You were supposed to endure it for one reason or another. So even to the point of when anesthesiology was first developed, that anesthesiology wasn't always widely used, that there were some prominent people, prominent physicians as well as theologians, ministers, who said that God has given us pain and therefore we should not do anything about it. This could be the case for major surgeries where people needed anesthesiology, but some of the major hospitals in this country, in Pennsylvania and New York, they were not giving anesthesiology to all of their patients who were undergoing serious surgeries.
Wow.
So there's reluctance that comes from cultural biases. And I think that my book is, in my opinion, it's unique in that it draws together both the scientific reasons why pain is such a problem, as well as the biases that people have in their heads about why they should or should not take some pain relieving measure. And it was especially dominant in children, that young children were often not given hardly any pain relief, especially after even major heart surgeries were given no analgesics afterwards. Even a major story that came out in terms of a preterm infant who had multiple surgeries and died. But when the mother wanted to review the medical records, she was astonished and horrified to find that the preterm baby had not been given any anesthetic at all. There was no anesthesiology given during these multiple surgeries that this poor little infant had to undergo. So there are biases. There are a lot of things out there that can help relieve pain. They're not perfect. None of them is perfect, but there are different ways. But misconceptions and biases need to be removed. There's also a big bias, racial bias. Black patients who would have the same types of injuries as white patients are often given fewer analgesics, pain relieving medications than the white people. And this has been shown over and over in many different studies. It's also true with other people of color, with Hispanics and Asians, that they often are not given as many and as effective pain relieving medications as white patients do. So there's many misconceptions, biases that play a role in status of unrelieved pain. And of course, there's the opioids. And you can tell me if you want me to go down that road or not. But
Connie, this is fantastic. This is so incredibly interesting. Thank you so much for everything you've articulated thus far. Guys, again, here on the line with Connie R. Faltynek. We're discussing her book, Pain, Why Do We Continue to Suffer? The Culture and Science of Pain. Available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and make sure you check out the video trailer that is located on her Amazon page. Now, Connie, this, as I stated, this information is fantastic, and thank you for everything that you've set up for us. And what a great segue that your previous answer had given, right? Because you're talking about, there's a lot of misconceptions. And there's a lot of variations to the research that you've been able to find and to people's own assumptions. Now, pulling from your book, and again, guys, we want to make sure that we are stressing the importance of this. This is not supposed to be picked up and looked at as a self-help narrative. It's supposed to be picked up and viewed as an informative narrative. Everything that is discussed, just because it worked for one individual, does not guarantee it's going to work for you. But that's the reason why she has put and laid out options that have been found to work, so you can explore that with your medical physician, okay? Just want to make sure that we reemphasize that. Now, Connie, talk to our listening audience about some of the information in which you found and discuss some of the options that you explore in the book with our listening audience, please.
Okay, I'm going to do that by breaking down into types of pain.
Yes, please.
And I talk first about acute pain, which would be probably the most severe, would be pain after surgery, after a major surgery or something like that. Here, I strongly say that opioids are the best things to take. Other things are not going to relieve your severe pain. This has been shown over and over and over again. Opioids, however, as everybody knows, have liabilities associated with them. But I do go through in the book that the risk of addiction is much lower than the media portrays. I go through all the data from multiple studies that most people that successfully take opioids to relieve their pain, whether it's acute or chronic, are patients who have never had any drug abuse issues or alcohol abuse issues. If those patients are taken out of the equation and not given the opioids, the remaining number of people are really quite safe as long as they take the opioids as directed. So I first want to get that. That's a major misconception out there, and I can go through the reasons. I do go through it in the book, The opioid abuse crisis is awful, and it needs to be brought under control, obviously. But prescription opioids right now are not the major cause of the problem. They are really the street drugs, and people should not fear taking opioids as much as they often do. The bigger problem is when physicians will not provide opioids, and there are many of them who have said, no, I will not. They will do it more for acute pain patients, but not for chronic pain, and that's where it gets more difficult. The things that exist for chronic pain, they'll take the edge off, maybe reduce 30% for the most part. And there are a variety of different ones with different mechanisms, and it's important to try different ones. Some are simply patches that you can put on, some are pills, some act in totally different ways. So I list some different medications that can be used to relieve pain. But once again, this is individualized, and it doesn't work for everybody. And I know a lot of people today want to avoid taking medications. It seems to be a trend these days. There's a lot of distrust of medications and even, obviously, some distrust of vaccines. But back to medications, because of this, some people have looked at alternative ways. And there are alternative ways to relieve pain. Again, this can be personalized. Some people say that for neck pain, back pain, the chiropractic works. A mainstream medical community doesn't necessarily buy that. Similarly, acupuncture. Some patients will say that it works. Once again, the mainstream medical community is pretty skeptical. But there are other ways that are a little newer that I think should be explored. And these are some stimulation methods that there's some stimulation methods that if you stimulate in one part of the body, which is not where the pain is, that it will send a signal that will scramble the signal that's coming from the pain itself. So it will reduce the pain. So these are electrical kinds of things that are applied either via a patch or some sort of a pad that has the things in there. And there's others that are more extensive that require surgery. But I have a good friend who had this done, and she's finding it quite acceptable. She suffered from excruciating sciatic pain for years. And this is one where you put a device that's implanted under the skin, either in the buttock or in the abdomen. And then there are leads that go to another device that is put directly into the spinal cord. So this is a surgical operation. But then there is a little remote that you can activate this generator that is in your butt, and it will then send a signal to the spinal cord, and it will block the pain. So this is one of the newer ways. It hasn't been around all that long, but it's one that is being used. And there are other electrical type things too that are being used. Some are still in exploratory stage, but some have been approved. And I talk about those in my book. So I think use of some of these other methods in combination with medications, as well as in combination with counseling via a psychologist, can help to remove some of the anxiety, whatever that accompanies pain. And the anxiety only increases the perception of pain. So if you can relieve your anxiety, say through Tai Chi or through yoga or something, that this reduces some of the stress hormones. And when the stress hormones are reduced, your anxiety goes down, and sometimes people will get some pain relief. So there are options out there. Your doctor may not necessarily be aware of them because they're pretty specialized. But I think if people bring it up to the doctor could refer, the primary doctor could refer somebody to a pain specialist who would be expert in some of these others.
Absolutely. And there you have it, guys. Again, just to re-impress it once more, as she just said, I mean, these are options to explore with your primary healthcare physician. Take this information, discuss it with them, make sure you're going about things in the most protective way possible. Last question, as we tie up this wonderful interview, I'm curious, what would you say was a highlight for you, Connie, in writing this book? Or if not a highlight, maybe something that surprised you that you weren't expecting prior to embarking upon the journey?
Like I said, I'm a biochemist, so I'm very much, like to understand molecules and how they work and that sort of thing. I'm not so much enamored or knowledgeable about things that are a little more esoteric. I need to understand how things work. So when I started exploring and reading about some of these alternative methods, I thought, yeah. This is not going to be very, very interesting or useful. But the more I read, the more I found that there is some understanding how some of these alternative methods may actually work via biochemical mechanisms that we do understand. So then I became more enthusiastic about that one should not ignore these alternative methods, even though they aren't always in the mainstream. But there is some sound biochemical basis why some of these actually do work. And so that I found was surprising and encouraging.
There you have it. Guys, what more can be stated? Listen, it starts with her Amazon page, starts with her Barnes & Noble page. Head on over there, pick up your copy of Pain. Why Do We Continue to Suffer? The Culture and Science of Pain by Connie R. Faltynek. Let's educate ourselves, let's grow, let's develop. And it starts with this fantastic narrative. This has been such a wonderful education and an absolute pleasure. Thank you once again for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
And thank you for the opportunity. I enjoyed talking with you.